gotta ask you, Mike, because you've got the largest collection of us. If anybody doesn't know, Mike has single-handedly one of the biggest video game collections I've ever seen. It is, it's only equal to the size of a museum I've been to in Brantford. You just have a lot of video games. Like, it's crazy how big.
And masterfully and artistically displayed.
Yes. I take a lot of pride in that collection in terms of how I display it, yes.
So what I thought would be fun to talk about today is because I think we all have different opinions about this. Now, let's talk about emulation.
Okay.
I am a big proponent of emulation. I love emulation. I think we should be emulating a lot more stuff. I think we should be getting better at our emulation practices. I think we should be having companies make things from the past redone in emulation so they can make more money from their old properties. I'm all about saving the past of video games, bringing them forward, and saving that stuff with emulation. I feel like that is really a core fundamental future for gaming, at least for retro gaming especially.
Yep.
I've been a PC gamer for years. A lot of the old PC games, they don't run on modern systems anymore, so you have to use DOSBox, which is basically a DOS simulator. And it runs so well. I've also played Amiga, the BBC Acorn on emulation. I've run Linux on emulation. I've run tons and tons of stuff.
You can even run Spectrum games on emulation. Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by the emulation culture and the community behind it, the independent community and the community that does it for pay. I love that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to emulation in games, you really don't talk about modern emulation too much. Now, the Xbox One is emulating the Xbox 360 to an extent in like kind of a closed-off system within itself.
Yep.
So you see that on modern systems. PlayStation Now is more or less streaming older games to the PlayStation service, and now that's going to be on PCs as well, so they're doing it everywhere. But I feel like when it comes to retro games, there is still this uneasy feeling for the hardcore that don't like emulating their classic games on modern systems because they feel like it's some disservice to their games. Now, you actually own tons of video game systems that most people in North America would only play through emulation because they simply can't afford that kind of technology or those kind of games like a Neo Geo and stuff like that. So what games do you have in your collection that you do that most people emulate?
Most people emulate would be like the rarer games. Like I have like almost a complete North American Sega CD collection. So like games like Snatcher, Space Adventure, Cobra, Keel Flying Squadron. There's 3 ones that if you wanted to go physically buy an actual copy right now, you're out thousands of dollars, literally. Castlevania X on the TurboGrafx CD, another super rare game. Pick any one of my Super Nintendo games like Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. Stuff like that, the way I look at it is like the rarest of the rare, that's emulated because people just can't afford, and nor do I blame them. Now, the way I look at emulation, it's kind of I kind of grew up a bit more mature because what I mean by that is in the past, and not too long past, maybe even just half a dozen years ago, I was super against emulation because I was Mr. Purist, because I own all these systems, like, nope, the only way to play the game is on the proper hardware, and if you can't find the proper hardware, then you're out of luck, which is I can't believe I used to think like that, because I'm someone who wants everyone to enjoy video games. And the way I look at it now, after I've kind of slapped myself in the face a few times, is I have this huge collection. If I want to play Rise of the Dragon or Shadowrun on the Super Nintendo, I'm going to take it out of my collection and play it on the actual hardware. As long as everything still works, as long as the disc doesn't have any rot or the cartridge contacts are still fine, I still will play it on the actual hardware. But that being said, I absolutely now do not have a problem. There's a few rarer games that I'm missing or games that I haven't tried before. Yeah, I will play them on emulation now, and I think everyone else should as well. Because it's important to me, like we talk about games like our discussion about Snatcher and all these other titles. I've always wanted people to try more. Like, I never understood like the fanboyism when people just want to concentrate on one system, even back in the old days. Like, I only play Sega, I only play Nintendo. I always thought that was silly because you're limiting yourself on what you should enjoy. And now I look at that now as an older mind. Like, I don't want people to limit themselves on what they should play. I think you should go back and enjoy these older games, either seeing what worked and what didn't work, or how well games have aged. Like, to look at a game like Castlevania 4, which is still, in my opinion, either the second best or arguably the best Castlevania game ever made. That game came out in 1991. You know what I mean? And it's outdoing a lot of modern games. And I think people should be able to play that whatever way possible now. I'm totally, I'd say, a totally change of heart no restrictions anymore as far as I'm concerned.
You know, the way I view people that only want to play one game from one system is the same way I view people that would only watch Disney movies or only watch Marvel movies. Well, I guess those two are interchangeable now. But only watch Warner Brothers movies or only watch Universal movies. They have that one like company they only watch things from, which really doesn't exist. You know, that's something that doesn't happen in really any other medium. You have your artists, you have your creators that you enjoy a lot. But in gaming, it's very strange because a lot of gamers traditionally don't follow the creators of the games, the directors, the producers. And I've had this argument a billion times sent to me too, where it's like, well, video games are made by a team. So are movies. Movies are done the exact same way. Do you think Steven Spielberg is sitting there like composing all the music for all of his movies? No, it's John Williams usually. I mean, it's like, but it's like the way it works. And I feel like when it comes to games, that the artistic merit of that stuff gets lost for some people in the emulation because they feel like it gets lost there. Now you own a Neo Geo with an MVS, so that's like the big cabinet where, if anyone doesn't know what MVS is, it's a big arcade cabinet.
The multi-video system.
Yeah, and the cartridges are about this big. They're huge little things. They're huge things.
They weigh about 5 pounds each.
Yeah, and like the going price for one of those games now is about like still in the hundreds.
Yeah, it's gotten a bit crazy. There are still some common games that were overproduced, like Fatal Fury or whatever that you can get cheap, but most now are gotten hundreds. 100 plus now,
and that's the MVS. Now, if you want to talk about the home console version of the Neo Geo,
even crazier.
The AES. See, what happened back in the day is the Neo Geo was a system that it was completely identical in the arcade as it was to its home counterpart, but to kind of separate the businesses, the cartridges, the actual what's the word I'm looking for right now? The actual thing.
PCB?
Yeah, sorry?
PCP?
The PCP, the PCP was a different size. So you couldn't just kind of, oh, you know what? The home cartridges cost less and I'm a good businessman, so I'm going to buy the home cartridges and put them in my 4-slot MVS Neo Geo at my convenience store and make money. So back in the day, the MVS was the arcade cartridge was more expensive than the home cartridge. But since there was more arcade cartridges made than home cartridges throughout the years, the value is completely flipped. So you can get an MVS bust a move for like, I don't know, whatever amount of money.
Far less.
Let's just say no phones, no unnecessary fact check. And let's just say for an example that it would be $100. Let's just say, right? The AES version of it, especially if it's complete in box, and they had instruction books, right? You're probably looking at $4. Just as an example. That's not something specific, but that's kind of like how it is swapped over time.
The best way to think about it too is, and this is why I think emulation is so important. When you look at Neo Geo games from that time period, and you look at those cartridges, look at the amount of detail in that game. There is way more. These cartridges had a lot of space. The consoles themselves were not cheap. They were expensive piece of hardware, and they put a lot of stuff into them. Traditionally, they were used as arcades for pizza parlors and for arcades and stuff. That's what they were. You could buy an entire fleet of MVS systems, and each MVS could have a different game in it, and that's what was so awesome. Hey, you know that arcade cabinet you have at home, or that you bought for your pizza parlor? Don't worry. When you want a new game on it because people are getting sick of it, you just buy a new game instead of buying a whole new set. It was a great idea.
Or cycle the games in and out if you had a 2, 4, or 6 slot.
But we're at a point in time where the emulation of Neo Geo games is so perfect. I mean, it's been perfect for a long time, but we can play those games now in the comfort of our cell phones, anywhere really, our computers. Even emulation that's done on the Wii or the 3DS, they actually have these games ported to those systems, and the emulation of those older games are really, really well done. Now, one thing I want to mention: porting of these games means that they've redone the code and everything to work on another system. And emulation is basically when whatever the system is you're running on is emulating the original Neo Geo hardware as best it can. Ports are not the same thing. No. Ports can be varied and different. If you want to know more about ports, go check out Port Center, this really great show on YouTube, one of my favorite shows ever. And there's a great example where there's a port of Doom for the PlayStation. This is the first episode of Port Center, and he shows off the difference. The port of Doom on the PlayStation has a different soundtrack, a different lighting system, a different engine. It's a completely different game compared to the Doom that was released on PC. They didn't just take the PC code and drop it into the PlayStation version. Different game altogether. Now, when I'm talking about emulation with Neo Geo, I'm talking they get everything that the arcade system had and brought it over. We see MAME being brought up a lot, which is a multiple arcade emulator. And multiple arcade machine emulator, is that what it is? Yeah. So it can emulate tons of different arcade games or arcade systems, which is great because none of them are really the same. But the problem is MAME can be a little bit confusing for people to get into. It's not that easy. It's not like you download a ROM, drop it in the MAME, and it works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a weird thing about that.
A lot of problems with different versions and incompatibility. The most important thing about MAME, the most important thing about emulation, excuse me, just drinking some of your Coke Zero, though I got myself the burps. Back before, emulation was kind of more of a fuck you to the man. Because you're like, oh, I don't want to pay the money for this Super Nintendo game. Well, fuck you. I'm gonna go download it off the internets. Now emulation has taken on a completely different form. We all know what this form is. It is the preservation of the history of video games, which is paramount. Video games, anybody that likes to get behind video games and say it's the greatest medium in the world, they need to have a reality check. Because to have it as the greatest medium in the world, it needs to be treated as the best medium in the world. And you do that through the preservation of the history. Because in any other medium format, books, music, movies, what do they all have in common? Tangible, accessible history that is built upon. You know, you can't live in a video game ecosphere and every time a new generation comes around, fuck the past. We don't care about that. No, that's wrong. And that's the beauty of emulation. Because if you want to play an Atari 2600 game, amazing. You want to play Snatcher, amazing. You want to play anything, it is available to you. And the vast majority of games that you emulate are not available for sale. And that's a really important one.
Yeah.
Emulation used to be viewed as a very bad thing. But when no one is collecting that money, and we talk about this a lot, what's the point in paying an exorbitantly, artificially inflated price tag to line the pockets of some greedy asshole that is A, lucky enough to have whatever particular game that they're selling, and B, should be paying it forward, should be making it so the game's accessible. And unfortunately, society doesn't run that way. People aren't wired like that. So the solution is emulation. Guess what? You want to play every game on the Super Nintendo? You can. You want to play games on the Super Nintendo that never came out? Well, guess what? Someone, because of emulation, was able to translate it.
And also that games like, you know, some of the properties are still owned. Like obviously Super Mario World is still owned by Nintendo and they still renew the rights. But a lot of other games, a lot of these publishers don't even exist anymore. Or better yet, licensed games from publishers that do exist. Perfect example, one of the greatest beat-em-ups ever made, Batman Returns on the Super Nintendo. You'll never see it officially released again for your purchase because A, it's a Konami game, we don't know what Konami's up to now, and B, it's the Batman license, which Konami no longer has. Mm-hmm. The game is literally in limbo.
It's dead in the water.
Yeah,
but it's such a neat game.
But it's such a great game. So people should be playing it.
I feel like media enters into certain phases, and I think the apex phase for any form of media is what I don't know how you define it, but I consider it the library phase. Because when we look at books are available at the library, which means you can go to a library for free, get the books. Your government, your society has now built some kind of organization to have books available for you for free to further your intelligence, to further your knowledge. That's beautiful. That's education. Modern libraries now offer DVDs and Blu-rays. A lot of them do that. It's very frequently happening a lot more because they've seen this. They do the same thing with music CDs. They do the same thing with comics. It's really this part where a library basically identifies something being culturally relevant and allowing it to be opened up to the masses. Video games need to go the exact same route. We need to start seeing video games in libraries. And I know there's this idea from a lot of people, video games are not educational. Bullshit, they are. They are educational. There are relevant stories in these video games, relevant gameplay experiences, relevant interactive experiences that you can only find in these devices, in these things. I believe if we were to make some kind of legalized okayness, okayness?
I like that. The legalized okayness of video games.
Right?
Hashtag that.
If we could legalize video game emulation for public preservation and allow libraries to have a couple of MAME systems set up there so that people could go in and play a couple of arcade games of different backgrounds. Have these companies give their information and let them go into the archive so that they could hold them. I think we could see a really big fluctuation from the community at large, really putting in a lot of effort into emulation as they are now. You know, some of the games I've played that have now since played on real hardware, the first time I got to play them was through emulation because it was simply impossible to play it any other way. A great example is one of my favorite arcade games is the Outfoxies. And the Outfoxies is a game that basically influenced what Super Smash Brothers ended up becoming. But that game is a Japanese arcade game that never really made it to North America. To my knowledge, in North America, and I'm not even kidding, to my knowledge, there is one arcade system, possibly two, probably a couple more, but one arcade system I know that exists in North America. It's in Chicago in an arcade called the Galloping Ghost. That's the only place I know. If I want to play it, I got to go to another country. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane. If we had libraries with like really great emulation systems where we could have a whole bunch of PC classics, Amiga classics, a whole bunch of arcade games right there, I think it would be really cool. And do you think libraries would care? Oh,
you mean you get people back in?
We're getting people into the library, and as they're walking out, they happen to pick up a book or two so they can bring something back home. A library should be a central convergence place for people to really share and breathe in this wonderful stuff that we've created over the years. And I really believe video games have not accepted that.
No, of course not. Think of it this way. Think of your favorite movie. Blade Runner? I don't know yet, actually.
Yeah?
What's your favorite movie?
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future. Seven Samurai.
Oh, man, that makes me feel like I don't have a good sense of... hold on, give me a sec. You know what?
No, Back to the Future is a phenomenal movie. It's fun. It's indicative of its time.
Yeah, but
it's whimsical.
He just went Ridley Scott, and you just went Akira Kurosawa. Like, I gotta go with something that, like... I mean, no...
Yeah, isn't it Robert Zemeckis, though?
Zemeckis is good.
You're good. You're fine. You're fine.
Give me 2 fucking seconds.
You look... I'll talk.
Clockwork Orange. Oh, my God.
Okay.
I'm just gonna go with something. If I don't go Kubrick, I'm gonna sound like a... Because you're like, oh, that guy in the middle doesn't know about movies.
I don't know about movies. But the fact of the matter is we all have similar discerning tastes in movies. And so we're able to identify movies that A, we really like, B, have had huge impact on cinema, and to a lesser extent society, because it is a reflection of society and this is one of our main distractions. The fact of the matter is we could have all bought those on VHS. Then we could have bought all of them on DVD. And then we could have bought all of them on Blu-ray. And then we can buy all of them on digital download. See, the trend here... I also
bought the Laserdisc version.
You almost bought the Laserdisc. Yeah. Sorry. My bad. The Laserdisc version. But the trend is the important pieces of cinematic history never go out of style because they're reprinted for the latest formats. Something that video games, for a plethora of reasons, don't do. You know, whether there's too many systems or whether nobody can agree on something like the PC, whatever it is, and that's the problem blocks we're getting. But we as I would hope to say leaders in the video game community in terms of retaining cultural significance, retaining the history, talking about games that are old, because you know what? The games that are old have shaped the games that we play now, that shape the games that we will play tomorrow. We need to preserve the history, and we need to be very, very, very forceful about it. And that's why emulation has gone from ooh, you shouldn't do that, or, whoa, no, emulation can't get it 100% right. Look at Comic Zone with the lightning in front of the intro, blah, 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 right? Something may not be perfect. Tell me, anybody out there that watched a movie or listened to an album or anything like that wasn't an official original copy. First time I saw Akira was a dubbed tape, was a dubbed VHS tape. I've since bought it 3 times on various formats.
Have you ever watched it on the original celluloid?
That I would. Did I see in the theater? Sadly, no.
Yeah, see, it's one of those things. I remember with Citizen Kane, I actually got to see Citizen Kane on celluloid, like actually film, and it was different. It was a different experience to see that because you had to shut off the lights, you had to watch a projector on the wall, but it was a really cool way to experience that film. There are versions of movies out there, just like video games. There are variations on video games, things that are a little bit hard to come by and stuff like that, that you can't experience again because there's just no way to experience them. And with emulation, we can preserve those things.
Yep.
Like, great example, I'm not in gaming example, but because in gaming example, Snatcher is a great example of a game you can't play anywhere else.
You want to know what's a really great example for video games? I don't know. Looking at you guys made me think of it. I don't know. Whatever. A little arcade game called Alien vs. Predator by Capcom.
Yes.
A game that never saw a home release, and if you weren't in the arcades back upon its release, you don't know what this game is. Not the best game in the world, but fuck, is it fun?
Yep. It's a beat 'em up.
It's a quarter munching beat 'em up.
And what's funny is when most people think about that game, they're probably thinking about the first person shooters that have come out, but they're not thinking about that one. It's true,
Yep.
Like, okay, Aliens, and now we're talking about that. Aliens, Alien. There's a variation of Alien made for 8mm that is like 15 minutes or something. Something crazy. It's super short, but it tries to compress everything of the movie in a small thing. That version of the movie should be preserved. And I know it has been. I know you can turn on YouTube right now and find a copy of that movie and you can watch it all the way through. It doesn't take long. Like I said, 50 minutes.
Hey, what about Blade Runner? The latest box set of Blade Runner had 1, 2, 4 versions? Five versions?
Yeah.
Now think about that versus the video game equivalent. Obviously, it's crazy and impossible to get to buy Snatcher on multiple versions because no one's got an MSX2 or a PC8801 or fucking Super CD
in
or
North
whatever.
America,
In North America,
right? Yeah.
But like there's the biggest problem with games, and it's the biggest calling to have emulation is the fact that they're releasing old movies on newer formats if they know it's going to sell. Video games, there's too many hurdles. And this is where emulation is paramount. I believe emulation is one of the most important things in video gaming to preserve its history.
But here's the problem that I have right now. I don't believe video game companies are doing a good enough job with preserving their classics and their history.
No.
Look, how Warner Brothers cares so much about their older films. Disney, holy crap, man.
Going back only out for a limited time until it goes back into the vaults.
They love their classic stuff. They care about their heritage. When it comes to certain video game companies, Nintendo identifies as a company that cares about their history, but I honestly think Sega does a better job at preserving their history than Nintendo does. And that's sickening, because that's a company that really isn't around in the same way they used to be. But look, dude,
they've released some beautiful compilations and stuff
right now.
that.
Okay, right now. I'm going to give you 3 seconds. How do you play Super Mario Brothers right now?
On what? Like what? Sorry, that's so.
On what? Anything? Like, geez.
If I was gonna go home and play Super Mario Brothers right now, I play it on my PSP or original Xbox.
Okay, you're emulating it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, I'm emulating it.
When I think of Sega, where would you play play Sonic the Hedgehog right now? Right now.
I would actually fire up my Genesis and play it on that.
Play it on your Genesis?
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have your Genesis. What do you do?
I'd stick in one of my compilations, my Sega Genesis compilation on the 360, yeah.
Right? We don't have those for old Nintendo games.
That's true.
Go play the original Legend of Zelda. You can do it on Virtual Console on the Wii or on the Wii U, but now that the Wii is... Okay, look, I know we hate to say this, but the Wii Online Store... The Wii U Online Store, the Xbox 360 Store, those stores are going to go away, and they don't transfer their stuff over, as we can clearly see from Nintendo. So those virtual console versions of these games are going to go away again. They literally backwards this. They weren't supposed to do this. The virtual console was supposed to be a continuation of these classic titles so that people in the future could buy them. But they've literally walked back on that, because when they turn off those sources and their services, they're gone for good and they're never coming back. This is bullshit. You think, the idea is Nintendo cares a lot about their history. No, they don't. They really don't. If they did, they would have found some way to let people play these games on a bunch of other systems. And Sega's doing it way better, and that's weird.
If Nintendo really cared about its heritage, they wouldn't be releasing the mini NES for $60.
I really wish that the mini NES. It's not going to expand. It's going to be what it is. It's going to come out. It's going to be a great way for people to play older video games.
It's a snapshot.
That's a great thing. But once again, that doesn't solve the problem of having these games in a legal format for us to own and to save ourselves. Because clearly these companies do not care too much about their stuff. Now, when I was talking about that library idea of like having these games accessible at libraries, I know it sounds like a stupid idea or crazy. Like, who's going to allow you to do that? Well, look, there are companies out there. There are games in the public commons that are literally going to be lost in time because we're losing the technology to be able to play these things. There are games that were released for consoles and systems that you never see anymore simply because these companies don't hold the rights to them. A really great example of a defunct company that is technically owned by a French power company, and it's a little weird. They're called, they made Dune, the original Dune.
Interplay?
No, Mayan.
No. Mayan?
No, not Mayan.
No.
Mayan is Myst.
Who the fuck made the Dune? The Sega CD one? Are you talking about?
Yeah, Sega CD Dune, and it was Amiga Dune and PC. See, this is getting sad. We know our games. We can't remember this company.
And there's a reason.
Cryo. Okay, Cryo made tons of amazing, interesting games. There's this game called Commander Blood. That is one of the coolest games you will ever play for that era. It was released on DOS, at least when I played it was on DOS. And there was a sequel to it, only released in France, that was called Big Bang Bug. I think something like that. It was like this. It was a weird sequel. These are PC games that are lost. And where are you going to get those nowadays?
You're not.
You're really not. If emulation doesn't happen now, and it does, and companies don't start taking this seriously now, I think we're going to lose a lot of games in the future.
We definitely will.
And it needs to happen. I think, if anything, public domain on video games should start within 20, 25 years max, and literally becomes public domain. And emulation is the future in that. So emulation is not a bad word, and quite frankly, you should be proud to emulate, because in emulating, you're respecting the past of something that you really care about.
You're playing something that you weren't going to experience otherwise, and that's why I said I had that change of heart years ago when I realized, like, I'm being an idiot here. Like, holy crap, people should be experiencing these games. And like I said, if the publishers or the original holders of the copyright aren't willing to put them out there to people, they're just going to throw them in the vault, as you say, or whatever, then screw it. You emulate it to play it.
Exactly. Hey, guys, let's go emulate some games.
Let's go.